Aloha, I'm Malia Zimmerman, and this is News Behind the News. Honolulu and Hawaii just got ranked the worst place for freeways, or almost the worst place. And here today to interpret the study for us and to talk to us about our roads and bridges and what can be done to fix them is Panos Prevedouros, one of Hawaii's best transportation experts and also one of the country's best experts. He travels around the world consulting as well. So thank you for joining us, Panos.
Thank you, Malia.
Sure.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, tell us about this Reason Foundation study that came out recently and it ranked Hawaii pretty poorly.
Right. One of the main authors, David Hargan, out of North Carolina. He's a very famous professor, and now he's doing mostly consulting, but for many, many years he was one of the top experts in the nation assessing various trends, and now that's one of his specialties, to actually use data that the states submit to the feds and try to make sense of them. So although, for example, in your website, hawaiireporter.com, the state has a response and says, well, we don't know about this data because some states seem to have, problems. Well, David Hargan and Adrian Moore from Reason Foundation, they said, hey, we are totally on the up and up with the data. These are the data that states chose to submit. And based on that now, and based on all 50 states, Hawaii came to be 48th in the quality of the roads, which is terrible. And it's not a secret. We know that our roads are very bad. I mean, I ran for mayor in 2008 and 2010, and that was part of my agenda because even then the trend was clear. Obviously, since 2008, we made some commercials with potholes. At that time, we could almost count the potholes. They were in the few hundreds, the big ones. Now, every street has its own few hundreds of potholes. We are right now taping at Kaimuki High School. I don't know what these experts are saying, but obviously they are not driving Waialae Avenue. Waialae Avenue is a chassis shaker, like the ones that the automobile manufacturers have to check the rattles of the cars. It is unbelievable. Between here and Palolo, you can lose, 5% of your car. I mean, literally. Condition of the roads is totally, totally pathetic. Unfortunately, that's what happened with 10 years of neglect. Pavements is something that you actually need to invest $1 a year. And if you forget to do that, at the end of 10 years, you cannot do it with $10 anymore. The $10 have become $100. This is the problem we're facing. Our politicians obviously are not really bad. They can think. Unfortunately, the numbers now have become intractable. Something that we could have done with 50 to 100 million, now 100 million is only the patchwork. And nobody has the budget and the political will to take money from other projects, such as rail, which has a lot of money, and allocate $500 million to fix the pavements. Now, this is the good news, really. The bad news is that the Hargan study and the Reason Foundation study is mostly 2008, 2009, and maybe 2010 data. The last 3 years are not there yet because the feds take a lot of time to put them together and publicize them. So the situation has gotten significantly worse.
Well, the state is trying to say, well, this was from 2009, so we've done things to make it better, but actually it doesn't seem like the roads have gotten any better.
Because, and in fact, you can come and you can go and interview any resident in Kailua. They will tell you that in 2009, the conditions on the Pali Highway were not terrible. Today, they're terrible. They're so terrible that there is a letter to the editor every other month. And in response to that and pressure from windward politicians, the state has decided to admit that actually they don't have the money for a couple more years. They know that Pali Highway is in terrible shape. They did some patchwork, but the earliest they could do something is 2015. The situation is getting out of hand, and that is very unfortunate.
Well, it also, the study also talked about some other things. There's the pavement quality, and there was bridges, and some of the other things that were, we kept ranking up in 49 or 50 in terms of, like, at the very bottom.
We are ranking very low in methodology. We have not upgraded our code. I know that the state is using expertise at the UH, not myself. I'm not a pavement expert, but there is another professor that actually specializes on that, and he has done tremendous work over the last 4 years. Unfortunately, it is my belief that most of this work remains peripheral. They use it partly to do that, an experiment or a small corridor. We need to do the island and the state. Forget the small corridor. We need a PMS, pavement management system. We've been calling about this for 10 years. At least now they realize the need. They're working on it, but they are not working fast enough on it. Not enough resources are appropriated to really do a PMS which will let you prioritize the pavements, find out what costs are involved, and make a plan in 5 to 8 years to catch up. As we speak today, mid of 2013, we do not have a plan to catch up. And even if you squeeze politicians to give you an answer, how much and how long, the answer is nobody knows. It is a spin of words that we are trying our best, etc., but nobody knows how much and for how long time until we catch up to a level of condition of modest to good.
Well, one of the issues in the study came up was cost. I think it was the cost for per mile or so
Right.
on. And we
They
had
call it
the
the cost per lane mile.
Cost per lane mile, and we had the highest, 49th, in terms of, you know, when we say we're not saying 49th like we're the 49th
Right.
at the top. We're at 49th at the bottom. And so anyway, we're so expensive in terms of repairing,
Right.
and the state says, well, we have to import everything, and you've talked about
Right.
that before.
Right.
And as you've mentioned, you have to go from island to island to bring machinery. And also, can you talk a little bit about the asphalt, where we used to produce it and now we don't?
Right. That was one of the major failings we had as city and state administration. Once upon a time, perhaps the times where Mayor Fassi was around and the corresponding governor of the state, the situation was better, enough money was being appropriated. Bottom line, a set amount of lane miles was being done. At that time, and for many, many years, Tesoro, one of the two refineries, was producing locally asphalt. It's a process that you have. Asphalt is a product of the distillation process of crude oil. But you have to tune your refinery in order to produce it. Once you produce it, you cannot really accumulate it. And of course, given the land values in Hawaii, you can accumulate a little pile, but you cannot accumulate acreages of that. It's not cost effective. And then it begins to solidify, so you have all kinds of problems because you have to keep it hot. That's why it's called hot mix asphalt. Bottom line, politicians were not appropriating enough lane miles. And Tesoro found itself producing asphalt that nobody wanted. In fact, it was costing them more to produce it, put it in barges, and send it to California. And 1 month went by, 2 months, 1 year, 2 years of that. Tesoro said, well, you guys cannot get your act together. We're not here, we're here to make a reasonable profit, but we're losing money accumulating an asphalt that nobody wants. So they retuned their refinery, and from that point on, it became a lose-lose situation for us because we have no locally produced asphalt. We have to import it. Actually, the DOT said that I'm actually wrong right now. We're not importing it from California, which is a direct trip. We're importing it from Canada via the Panama Canal. Wow, how cost-effective is that? Hey, but that's what they do in order to bring here, asphalt. And then we have, since the barge comes, barges are big. They are not little boats. So once it comes, it cannot just stay. You have to dump it, so you have to pay the acreage to do that. Added cost on added cost on added cost. I mean, how unwise is that? And all of this because they couldn't program enough of our roads to get on a schedule so the production of the refinery can be maintained. One of the reasons why actually Tesoro went south, and for 2 years it was trying to find a buyer. As we speak now, supposedly there is a Texan buyer for another Texan because Tesoro is also based in Texas. Hopefully the refinery will be saved. I don't know.
Well, there's been 2 studies now, at least, that have come out about the quality of our bridges. The Reason study
Right.
mentioned how poor our bridges are at 49th. And in terms of another study that you mentioned.
Yes, that's an annual study with rates and grades. It's the American Society of Civil Engineers. They call it the scorecard of the infrastructure. Overall, the United States receives something like a C or C minus. Hawaii is in the D to D plus category, depending. D is not good because, as you know from school, C is the minimum grade we need to get in order to pass and get a degree. So the problem with Hawaii is that we have very old bridges on most islands because we have the mountains, they collect water, we have a lot of streams. Many of them were done in, almost ancient times. And most of them now, almost 90% of them, are considered what ASC calls them functionally obsolete. In other words, they still work as a structure. It's not a dangerous structure, but given the growth that you have and everything and the weights, this thing is supposed to be a much stronger 4-lane bridge, and you have a Kakamimi 2-lane bridge. It's not dangerous, but it's functionally obsolete. And in fact, it's dangerous secondarily because traffic has to narrow and it might create accidents and other conflicts as well as congestion. Dangerous bridges, I think we have less than 10%. The organization of civil engineers is quite, conservative. We wouldn't really call a lot of bridges as dangerous, but, several of them, like a wooden bridge out in Waianae, they really need to be repaired quickly because if a heavy equipment needs to go to Kaina Point, that bridge may collapse if there is insufficient planning for the way to go through.
Right. So, and we've seen accidents happening here when heavy machinery is moved or big trucks are moved and they accidentally hit the freeway overpass. We've unfortunately seen that.
And we've seen 2 spectacular failures on the mainland. One was in Minnesota almost 10 years ago already, I-35W, with the bridge collapsing completely and having victims. And the victimless one in Washington State, I believe, that an overloaded truck, which was permitted to use the bridge, so the DOT thought, it's strong enough as long as you don't have other cars. So the truck went all along and the segment collapsed. Bottom line, the United States is in major crisis in general, and Hawaii secondarily with major bridges along the highway. And it's not surprise to anybody, there is nothing wrong. All of these things are 50s and 60s. Trains need to be redone, bridges need to be redone. Already most of the 50s and 60s buildings, particularly hotels, sometimes schools and other, projects, housing projects. Cabrini Green, I was talking to Rick Hamada the other day in Chicago, they demolished it in 1998. I mean, all the 50s and 60s projects, they're obsolete infrastructures. Nobody has cars from the 50s or 60s unless it's something that you keep for museum use or as a, tinkering with it. Bottom line, replacement.
Right. You participated recently in a forum in Kapolei and another one with the League of Women Voters.
Right.
What were some of the highlights that, say, came out of the West Oahu
Well, the
event?
common thread is that the establishment or the powers that be, they have a main focus on development. And nobody's looking behind their back to see, look at the infrastructure. We have water main breaks, we're under a sewer consent decree, so we are not fixing what the current city requires to be fixed. And you guys are talking about 49,000 new housing units in Eva and 5,000 plus new housing units in Kakako. Sure, both of them have this angle of, a lot more people, a lot more trips, a lot more congestion. Okay, we can deal with it, that's another topic. But now we're talking about infrastructure. 5,000 units in Kakako. They need to drink, they need to use to flush the toilet. Where is the infrastructure for that? Already we have major problem taking care of Waikiki. And most economic reports, they say that other sectors of the economy may not do as well, but foreseeable future for Hawaii, for the tourism is very rosy, mostly because Asia is booming. So if those guys don't come, the other guys will come, whether they are Korean, Filipino, Chinese and all. They have different economies, they are diversified, they're getting richer, more people will be coming. Take care of what we have. They really need to do accelerated infrastructure for Waikiki, water and sewer. Instead, now the focus is HCDA and Kakako. And of course, the Eva development. Apples and oranges, I mean, nobody looks at the crisis and they're looking at some rosy picture, of a future that is not going to happen in a positive way because we're leaving behind too many liabilities.
Right, and let's talk about some of those. You talked about that when you ran for mayor, and Governor Cayetano talked about that when he ran for mayor, and really nothing's changed. It's gotten worse.
Right.
And so some of the issues you brought up, okay, so the sewer consent decree, that's about $2 billion.
It's $2 billion to start with. That's the part of the consent decree, but the consent decree has $2 billion for 2 secondary treatment plants. One is the expansion in Sand Island and the other expansion in Honolulu. Both of them are pretty bad ideas because nobody really has gotten sick because we are pumping we do the first level treatment for the sewage and we pump it 15 miles out in the ocean and essentially we discharge it there. The ocean works in our favor. I mean, we're providing essentially nutrition to the ocean, but the EPA and Sierra Club and all, they insist that some of the not so good things that they are in the waste, they may come back to our shores. Bottom line is that, you know, probably there is more urine in the shores because of natural use by beachgoers rather than the sewage that comes from 15 miles out. But we've been trapped into that. So it's a $2 billion liability to build something we don't want. That is not going to make anything any better. It's just expenditure of money. Then there is about $2.5 billion for the sewer lines, like the huge black thing we see on Alawai, that it was on the TV recently, that finally that big temporary behemoth will be put, will be taken out because the permanent behemoth has been put under the ground as it is supposed to be.
Temporary since 2006.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, 7 years.
That tells you the pace at which we're addressing problems. So it took us 7 to 8 years to partially address Waikiki problem. We haven't even gotten to addressing the existing growth in Kaka'ako, and we are ready to permit. We have permitted 2,000 units in Kaka'ako. The issue now is, are we going to permit 3,000 more? And in EVA, the ridiculous thing about EVA is that already 35,000 homes have been permitted. They're good to go within the next 5 years. But the EVA development, the establishment wants to approve another 12,000 for Ho'opili, which is something, you know, people really admire, because as you drive on the freeway on the Mackay side, that's Loon Farms and all the other small farmers. That's where the kids go to the pumpkin patch and all. That's Ho'opili. All of that is going away and is replaced by 12,000 homes. That's the last prime agricultural land that remains on the entire island of Oahu. And we make a conscious decision. And politicians vote 9-0, will vote next week, 9-0 on the city council to take the prime agricultural land and make 12,000 cookie cutter homes. And that's the future of Oahu with the existing establishment. You know, it's really, you know, very inappropriate to say the least.
Well, a lot of times we hear politicians talking about sustainability, and we have a whole legislative organization that works on sustainability for 2050.
Right.
Part of it is talking about how do we have sustainable, self-sufficient on an island and growing our own food.
To the max.
Right.
Lip service to the max. The same thing as with the energy. We are totally dependent on oil. We put windmills. The wind goes down, then what? You go back to oil. I mean, really, these people cannot be taken seriously. Many times, you know, I'm almost growing desperate here that, you know, Elvis logic has left the building. Logic is outside of Hawaii right now. It wasn't like this. But because of essentially no checks and balances in one-party system, there is no checks and balances. They just do whatever they want for quick profiteering.
Another issue that's coming up right now that's current is the fact that people are trying to get solar, and you have solar, but they can't get the final approval. It's taking months and months and months to get the final approval just to get it turned on.
I just saw a report. I cannot believe that this is happening. And I don't know why it is happening, because you already get the permit, and the contractor got the permit to put it on. I think that the activation can occur, and then they can take their time and then perhaps unplug it if there is a major issue. But why would you give a permit to the constructor? It's like, you know, permitting a home, going out there and not allowing the residents to go in. Of course they go in. And at some point there is a final inspection of, you know, I don't understand that part, because there's actually extremely little danger and public safety issues involved. So yeah, I saw that lady. This is for months. She has paid the lease and everything. Everything is on her panel. The panels are on the roof. She has paid the bills. She doesn't get any juice. Incredible.
And she's not the only one. I've heard of other people, and I actually heard today of somebody waiting 10 months. So
I don't know,
it's quite stunning. Where for a town that wants to promote solar and natural energy.
Right. I guess I was lucky. I did it very early on. And, you know, there were only 6, you know, providers and 6 inspectors. Now there are 30 providers working double shifts, and there are still 5 or 6 inspectors. So somewhere the system has broken down. The irony is that now the city demands a $750 you know, application fee or permit fee. Before it used to be free. So yes, it's not working efficiently, obviously.
Right. I think it sounds like they need more inspectors and a better system.
Yes, and actually the inspection, I mean, they have to pass a system that the inspection can be, on a delayed fashion. It's almost like your car running out of inspection for a couple of months. It's still a fine car to use for an extra 2 months. That inspection is not going to, make the car any safer.
Mm-hmm. So what else besides, we talked about sewage, we talked about, and water main breaks, we didn't get to talk about that. We have almost one a day.
Yes, and that turns out to be very destructive. Yesterday I was on the road and I heard that about a major run in Makakilo. I was quite surprised because, Makakilo is a fairly newer neighborhood. I mean, it's not very recent, but it's just 20, 25 years, and it's up on a hill, so it doesn't have the salt corrosion or underground water table and all. Major water main break, so I don't know if 25 and 30-year-old pipes are bursting, and this city has quite a few 80-year-old pipes. I don't know. Water pipe Mageddon may be coming, and 1 month may be the month of, total freeze because we're going to have 10 or 20 a day, and then obviously the crews cannot get to it. Bottom line, I mean, it's not to be overly alarmist, but the Board of Water Supply knows that this problem, that they have over 300 a year for a long time, and again, no plan of how many miles, how much money, over how many years, and when are we going to get ahead? When are we going to have 90% of our pipes being 10 years or younger? Are we ever going to get to that point? If we are to get to that point, how much money, how much time? Is it attainable? Nobody has the answer for these are very simple Excel spreadsheets to do. This is a small city, specific lines. I mean, everything is on a GIS. How come we don't have the answer? Even with rough figures of, so much per mile, 3 million a mile to replace it. Okay, count the miles, tell us. How much can you contract? The problem now will be compounded if the rail construction goes, right now the rail is stopped. The mayor says that in November they'll start in earnest and, full tilt. Fine. This comes with disadvantages because where the rail is moving around, nothing else can. So, and imagine now the double whammy of building the rail, and within 100 feet you have a sewer or water main break. That'll make things quite interesting. But most importantly, the rail will be construction intensive. So where are all these oodles of construction workers to do the Honolulu plant, the 5,000 apartments, the EVA houses, the rail, and fix the water mains? Is anybody really putting any numbers together as within 10 years, can we do these things physically? I mean, do we need to import San Diego here to come and work in order to fix our city in the next 5 to 10 years? Some things don't begin to make sense anymore.
And the workers here don't want anybody coming from the outside.
That's
They protest that.
And in fact, when Mufi was there, he had a proclamation there, local first or local only, and that's the agreement. I mean, that's how rail will be built. So want it or not, people who work in construction, all of a sudden they'll become rail experts. Oh, problem, you are not a rail expert? That's okay. The city will pay for you to become a rail expert and come build it, which means the rail, instead of taking 6 years, it'll take 10 years to be built because we're insisting in making our own workers rail experts to build the rail, and then there's nothing else to build. So all the expertise they acquired is actually useless. As I said, logic has left the building.
There is a chance, though, that the rail could be stopped with the Ninth Circuit Court case.
Right, it's coming up in August.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll wait and see. Yes.
Right, because that could change everything.
It could
change in terms of the funding not being, able to be used and not
right.
holding up the.
If the appellate court finds major flaws in the environmental process, the clock will be reset to 2008. Yes.
So if that did happen, what about Ho'opili? Would Ho'opili still be built? Do you see it being built no matter what, or is it based on the rail?
No, it's a separate process. Mm-hmm. It's a separate process. The premise of it is that it will have 2 stations, and around the stations they'll build a transit-oriented development, but it can occur without it. And I have reviewed, and I was, one of the testifiers at the Land Use Commission. And the developers' approach is that they will develop it in at least 3 to 4 phases. So first phase will take 5 or 6 years, then it's a wait and see attitude. If the rest of it is not, if the rail doesn't come through, if there is no more traffic capacity, if congestion is terrible, maybe, by default, you have the permit, but you decide to not build it because the market is not going to absorb it.
So what do you think should be done? I know you had a whole plan for when you ran for mayor, and also so did Governor Cayetano.
Right.
But basically, the idea is stop the rail, use the money for things that need to be done.
Right. The point is not really for us. I mean, we've been labeled the stop the rail or no rail people. It's just that we believe that, it's a waste of $6 billion on something that will not work. Anywhere you look at the statistics, fewer than 10% of the people, and most likely in our case 3% of the people, will use the rail. So the benefits will be minuscule. So the solution is to address congestion head on. Congestion occurs at the H1, H2 merge, at the Middle Street merge, and entering into town. We need to add a minimum of 2 reversible elevated lanes from the H1, H2 merge all the way to town via Nimitz Highway. It is something that it fits. It can be done for a cost of anywhere between $1.5 and $2 billion. It will solve the problem. Now there are so many, I see articles out there that some people are calling the rail the scam, because they have identified 3 to 6 stations that they're well within the inundation zone of the next 50 years if there was due to climate change there is a water rise. So 6 of the stations will be flooded, not the stations themselves, but you will not be able to get to them. The train will be working, but you will not be able to get out in Kakako because, well, then you need a boat to get out of the train. And, it makes sense because the rail is a brand new infrastructure. When you build other things than the things that they've been built, well, they've been built already. We didn't have the 50-year and 100-year projections. Now we do. So since there are projections like that, we're supposed to be building infrastructure that is resilient to that. So why are we following that alignment? It makes no sense. So multiple reasons to stop the rail and go with these reversible lanes, which in case of calamities such as hurricanes can be also an emergency infrastructure to go across the island for emergency crews only.
So people want to get more information. Tell us what your blog is and also when your show airs on Olelo.
My show airs on Mondays. I believe it's, you catch me in a moment that I don't remember right now. I think it's 6:30 every Monday or the first Monday of the month. It's called Panos 2050 Solutions for Sustainable Hawaii. But to get the exact announcements, go to my blog by Googling a single word, Fix Oahu.
All right.
Fix Oahu will take you to my website, and then you will know everything you need to know about infrastructure and the rest.
All right. Well, thanks, Panos, for coming on the show today. And we thank you to the audience for joining us today. This has been News Behind the News. Aloha. Thanks.